There was a foggy December evening when I sat down with a couple of friends in the pub. As we chatted about life and what we were doing over the Christmas holidays, they repeated a question they'd asked me only a few months ago. The same question I had been asking myself. Yet here I was, still unable to give a definitive answer. I might be a bit of a dreamer, but I also like to take action. So the very fact that my response was still muddled frustrated me. Attuned to my annoyance, my friend turned to me and said, "Would you mind if I offered you my thoughts?" Always keen to hear another person's perspective, I wholeheartedly welcomed them. "Your face lights up when you talk about it. That light is coming from your heart. Maybe if you paid more attention to the feeling and less attention to your thoughts, you'd be closer to the answer you've been looking for." They had a point. I had been so fixated on finding the answer in my head that I got lost in the chaos of thinking. Their words landed with me in a way that hadn't until now. It wasn't that they were entirely new to me, but I had only ever heard them through the voice of fear that repeated the same what if, buts and maybes, the voice that relished in throwing a bucket of water over the tiniest of sparks that arose from within me, and the voice that haunted me in the middle of the night. Unsure as to which direction to follow, my head or my heart, I spent hours dithering and procrastinating as the two battled it out for my attention. I went home that night and asked myself the question again, and again my answer was confused. Laura, you want to follow your passion, your purpose, your contribution, your dream, so why don't you just go for it? The voice that continued to shout the loudest was not the one from my heart, because truthfully, I have bills that need to be paid, and as much as I've wanted to follow my dream, my head just keeps saying no. So with a heart that says yes and a head that says, "Are you sure? Maybe now's not the time," I needed some help. I took myself on a deep dive into what it means to follow your gut, your intuition, or maybe even your heart. My digging took me to a wonderful article from the Saturday Evening Post in 1929, where the physicist Albert Einstein was asked what led him to his own source of genius. He replied, "I believe in intuitions and inspirations. I sometimes feel that I am right. I do not know that I am." It turns out that Einstein trusted his intuition and imagination more than his knowledge, and believed that it was much better to trust those instincts and test them than to ignore them. So if the world's greatest physicists followed his intuition, then perhaps I ought to give mine a shot. But this is not 1929, and this is not a decision about testing the theory of relativity. This is a decision about my life. I continued to dig deeper and came across a whole bunch of conflicting articles sprouting different studies that completely contradicted each other. I watched endless videos on YouTube and listened to countless podcasts, but I only became more confused. Using my heart to decide which pair of shoes to wear to dinner is unlikely to be detrimental, but using my heart to make major life decisions like where to live, whether to start a family or leave a job, could be. The fact that months after being asked the same question I was still unsure was enough for me to realise that my head and heart had become so conflicted that it was hard to listen to either. I began to wonder what even was intuition. Is it the same thing as a gut feeling? Is it something your heart is calling you to do? Despite finding a ton of contradictions, I did discover to my surprise that there is more and more evidence to suggest that intuition is not innate but learned. Neuroscientist and psychologist Joel Pearson defines it as the learned positive use of unconscious information for better decisions or actions. But with every paper, opinion and definition I consumed, I found myself getting further and further away from being able to answer my own question. And if anything, my deep dive only reinforced the huge disconnect I had been creating between my head and my heart. With all the pressures and conditioning that we are exposed to as we grow up, is it any wonder that we struggle to differentiate between the two? To listen to our inner voice and not the external one that criticizes, condemns and says, "Don't do it, you'd be silly to do it. You don't know what you're doing. What if it all goes wrong?" There have been moments in my life when I have never been more sure about a decision that comes when you feel as though something isn't quite right. Maybe it's a place or person. You can't quite figure it out or explain why you feel the way you do. You just do. For me, it was a couple of weeks ago. I was out walking my dog in some nearby fields. With the light fading, my phone battery running out, with no one nearby, something in me said, "Turn back now." In just a matter of seconds, my brain had processed the potential danger, and as I made it back to my car before darkness, I had never been more glad to have listened to my gut, my intuition, or my heart. The next day I turned to my journal as normal and as I sat with pen in hand waiting for the words to fall, I received a text from my brother who reminded me of a poem that he sent a few months back. Only this time it had never felt so profound. My brain and heart divorced a decade ago over who was to blame about how big of a mess I've become. Eventually they couldn't be in the same room with each other. Now my head and heart share custody of me. I stay with my brain during the week and my heart gets me on weekends. They never speak to one another. Instead, they give me the same note to pass to each other every other week, and the notes they send to one another always say the same thing. This is all your fault. On Sundays, my heart complains about how my head has let me down in the past, and on Wednesday, my head lists all the times my heart has screwed things up for me in the future. They blame each other for the state of my life, and there's been a lot of yelling and crying. So lately, I've been spending a lot of time with my gut, who serves as my unofficial therapist most nights. I sneak out of the window in my ribcage and slide down my spine and collapse on my gut's plush leather chair that's always open for me. And I just sit, and sit some more until the sun comes up. Last evening, my gut asked me if I was having a hard time being caught between my heart and my head. I nodded. I said I didn't know if I could live with either of them anymore. My heart is always sad about something that happened yesterday, while my head is always worried about something that may happen tomorrow. I just can't live with my mistakes of the past or my anxiety about the future. My gut smiled and said, "In that case, you should just go with your lungs for a while." I was confused. The look on my face gave it away. If you're exhausted about your heart's obsession with the fixed past and your mind's focus on the uncertain future, your lungs are the perfect place for you. There is no yesterday in your lungs, and there is no tomorrow there either. There is only now. There is only inhale. There is only exhale. There is only this moment. There is only breath, and in that breath you can rest while your heart and your head work their relationship out. This morning, while my brain was busy reading tea leaves, while my heart was staring at old photographs, I packed a little bag and walked to the door of my lungs before I could even knock. She opened the door with a smile, and as a gust of air embraced me, she said, "What took you so long?" I love this poem, and my brother sent it to me at a time when he didn't know that I needed it so much. And as I read out loud those last words, I realised that I'd been completely consumed in my head, so much that I'd almost forgotten to come up for air. My lungs were full of fear. You see, fear, at least in my case, has been the biggest obstacle to following my heart. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of not meeting people's expectations, fear of not being able to pay the bills. But as I zoomed out and took a bird's eye view of myself and my life, what I saw was someone who had become too reliant on logic and objective reasoning. The heart and head were not only divorced, they were at loggerheads. So instead of berating my mind and ignoring my heart, I decided to be kind and welcoming to both of them. Thinking my way to intuition was never going to work, because intuition doesn't follow logic, but it is something that perhaps arrives within us. In my desperate attempt to find the answer, I've been creating more noise in my head and more distraction. All this time I, and only I, had been blocking myself. The next morning I took my lungs to a quiet patch in the hay barn and sat. I took some deep breaths and invited both my heart and my head to make peace with one another. I realised that my mind isn't trying to hurt me. It's designed to protect me from danger. But here's the deal, so too is my heart. Neither are trying or wanting to hold me back. The only thing clipping my wings is an almighty dose of fear, which is completely normal when change is on the horizon. As I sat looking out over the fields with the rain clouds above me, I rewrote my own narrative. I quieted my mind, gave my heart a hug, and filled my lungs with the fresh air. With nature for my companion, I could feel free from the clutter in a way that I hadn't been able to before. And in that moment, the billion tabs that had been opened in my head slowly began to close. And in the space that had been left, I had never been more clear as to what I wanted my next chapter to be. It is now February, and if my friends were to ask me the same question they did that night in the pub, and more importantly, if I were to ask myself the same question, I would have an answer. Laura, you are already writing your next chapter. Give it the time and space to fill up, just like you have your lungs. Don't be in so much of a hurry. Give your fear a well-earned rest and step boldly and proudly into your new narrative. You have flipped the script for yourself and many others time and time again, and as you well know, the biggest gifts come from the most unexpected of places. Your heart and head need not be separate. Intuition, gut instinct, your heart's calling, whatever word you use, it's all just part of what makes you a human. Your heart and head need not be in battle. Both are part of your compass, just guiding you to your greatest chapter yet. And just like any other healthy relationship, your head and heart need some space from one another. What might have guided you in your previous chapter might not be what guides you in your present or even the next one, because every moment in your storybook has been a valuable nugget of information that shapes the narrative that you live right now, a narrative that can either pull you back, keep you stuck, or propel you forward to a new desired reality. Your job is to sit and breathe and decide which one you want to exist in. A pair of lungs was what I needed the most. My heart and head may not always be the best of friends, but they are most definitely no longer in the courtroom. And as you listen to this now, I have truly never been more excited for what is to come.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Flip It, and if you did, I would be hugely grateful if you could rate, review and subscribe, because together we can discover and share more stories and voices that deserve to be heard.